Okay, here's the third little video for this week. Lighting, shadows, fog. We're gonna do some easy little trick right here. Actually, let me turn the I want to turn the grid off here. Network. Grid brightness 0. Okay. Shadows. We're going to look at a few things. Rim lighting, making shadows, different light types in the light comp. Something called a look at parameter for both cam and light comps. Also using something called a null comp. And then also doing fog. So let's look, maybe first let's do the rim lighting here. Let me just, let's turn off the shadow actually. Let's go shadow. It's just as easy as that. So rim lighting, maybe let's just only look at Geo1 also, just to keep it simple. If we go just Geo1, okay, so all we see is this main sphere right here. Where is it? If I go home all, there it is. It was hiding. It's kind of our biggest little planet. So our Phong material, you can see we have diffuse color is this kind of desaturated sort of greenish color, but then on the edge we also have this purplish color, which is our rim light. And to do that, we can just see over here on the rim tab. So by default, that's off. So if we enable it, and just very easy, we choose a color, choose rim center, kind of moves it around like so. Width makes it go more or less essentially. And then strength, that's a little bit too strong, right? So just like a little extra little flare right there. That's all we're looking for. Very easy, right? So you can add some just cool, make your lighting situation a little bit more complex. You can have multiple rim lights. So if you just add plus here, rim light 2, and then, I don't know, we can do something like, what if there's a yellowish one over here and make that maybe lower. So you can always, you can add as many of these as you want. It's probably like you get to a point like 1 or 2 maximum is probably all that you want to do, or else it gets too complex. But that's a nice easy way to do that. So we can do, with all these different Phongs. Then I have that turned on, and then and actually for here I had, for rim color, this is actually looking at Phong 1 at its parameter, right? It's rim 1 color R, color G, color B, right? So if I'm changing the rim color here, like this was automatically changing also. So let's see this again. If I do Geo2, so if I change this to like hot pink, beautiful, then it changed automatically. Okay, whatever. Bring that down a little bit. All right, looks good. So shadows. So you can maybe see when I do this up here, it's quite easy. In your light comp, all we do is, so I've got light type different here already, but shadows, by default, that's off. And then poof, that's it. All right, so super easy. Usually you want to do hard actually. If you have a PC, especially with the NVIDIA GPU, soft it can be nice sometimes. It gives you a little bit more parameters here. In general, you can tell that they look basically the same. There's a kind of you can make it a little more diffused there, but this, it doesn't really make sense kind of if you're changing the light size parameters. So especially if you have a non-NVIDIA GPU, a lot of these things it doesn't quite look the way you think it should. So you can just keep it as hard shadow type, which is just fine. Shadow casters, so this would be everything. If there's a certain object, then you only want that object to cast shadow. So right now my Geo2 essentially would be casting the shadow because it's this kind of bluish sphere. If I only wanted that to cast a shadow, I could do that. if I, let's say if I like only wanted something else, what if I did this? Yeah, there we go. So now only Geo1 is a shadow caster. So this blue sphere is not a shadow caster, therefore it is not casting a shadow anymore. So you can really specify like that. So usually you just have that as a star, meaning everything. And then here, okay, so the shadow is being cast onto this geo. So if we go into our material there, if I look at advanced and shadow strength is a parameter here. Usually that's 1, so you can see that's like totally black, but that doesn't really look proper, right? It makes more sense if you bring that down a little bit. So you can kind of just play with that to a point where it makes sense. Shadow color, like that doesn't look realistic at all, but you know, maybe you need that to be different colors. And then there's some other little interesting settings here. So this is actually is not to do with the shadows, but it adds a little extra specular light, a little specular reflection, I should say. You can see the normal speculars right there. It's just kind of a shininess. There we go. I can play with that right there. But that's not for the shadow. So the shadow strength right here is basically what you'd be playing around with. So that is super easy. Let's look at light type. Actually, you know what? Let's do light type, and also there's these null comps here, which are weird. So what's happening with those? If we look at, okay, right here. So I got my light, null 2. So the light is looking at null 2. And we can see a little reference right there is happening. Let's do this. I want to make a new light, and we can do this from scratch. Light 2, and I'm going to go back into my render. Instead of all lights, I only want it to look at light 2. So now you see there's not a reference from light 1 to render, because render is only looking at light 2 now. And so if let's just look really quick at Geometry Viewer so we can get a sense of what's happening here. So this right here, which is highlighted, that is my new light that I just made, light 2. So it is a point light. And you can see by default, it's on what, x equals 0, y equals 0, and z equals 10. Yeah, there we go. So translate 0, 0, 10. Light type is point light. So what a point light does is it is a point in space, and it emits, you kind of see with these little lines here, it emits light in all directions from that one point. But what I want to do is I want to turn this into a cone light. So when I do that, let's see if I can actually split this so we can see both at once. Oops. There we go. Okay, cool. And so now this became a cone light, so you can kind of see it's only pointing in one direction. And by changing our values here we can kind of see, if I get this out of the way. So by changing that cone angle, right, we see this beautiful kind of shadow thing happening over here. Okay, so cone angle is doing that. Cone delta is changing. You can kind of see. So 0 would be, there is no, delta is the kind of the transition from 100% light to 0% light. So in this case, it's kind of a binary thing. It's on and off. So we can make this controls this kind of blurriness, right? And then roll off is similar. It's a fine tuning of that kind of blurry transition in between there. So usually just a roll off of about 1, and then by changing the delta, that kind of makes a nice little diffuse blurry light. Okay, that's cool. So what I had before was the light was kind of like up here and over and then casting from an angle. By default, with our our light at this position, it's kind of shining directly in front. You can see our camera is right here. But I wanna get a sense of like the light being in a different position. So I could go up here just to transform, and let's boost up the Y, let's say, and then maybe the X a little bit. So now we have a problem, right? If we see our light right here, it's no longer pointing to our sphere. I could then do like, okay, rotation. How do I do this? Point down. You can kind of see when it comes into view here in the light display, we can kind of see the view from the light, so that helps a little bit. Oops. And maybe like that, maybe a little bit more over there. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I could also do something like this. If I click that, if I move this around, see what happens? I'm translating the light and changing its rotation. If I go back here now, look at all this. So I just changed the translate, rotate, and pivot values manually by clicking this and just moving this around. So again, left mouse click kind of rotates, right mouse click pans around, middle click, and then left and right kind of zooms in and out. So sometimes that could be just a nice, more like fluid manual way to do things. Another way to do this, let me actually go back. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And let's do this again to like something like this. Another way to do this so that you can maybe move these around and you don't have to worry about the light kind of looking away from the object that you want to be lit up is using this look at parameter. So what I have here is a null 1. And if you can kind of see it translate 0, 0, 0. So there's this null object, this little crosshairs that actually lives at the 0, 0, 0 point here. If I move this over, let's say, there we go. You can kind of see that now. So now it's at 3, 0, 0. There it is. So wherever that is, the light will follow it. So let's do that for our new light right here. If I just put that in look at. And you'll see this light kind of move around as I move. See, look at that. Great. So the light is automatically rotating, moving around as I move my null. So my main sphere here is just at 0, 0, 0, so I can very easily just put that. And so now if I did something like, if I'm like moving this around a little bit, right? So even if I'm translating, it's still going to always look at exactly that point in space, so that it can be a really helpful thing. So it makes it easier. Like if I wanted to like animate this, translate maybe, it's always going to keep that. Okay, cool. The final light type is distant light, and what this does is kind of has a similar cone-like feeling to it. But what it does is it's like it's not really a point in space. It just casts parallel rays of light, like to infinity. So like the light rays will never meet in space. They're all just a parallel light. So this will be kind of like lighting very evenly from some angle. So it's more about kind of like what is the angle of the light coming. But cone looks pretty good for us right now. Okay, cool. So I'll just keep that. I always like to kind of color my things a little bit. So get light, hit C. You can get these little colors here and kind of color code them in various ways, however you like. Okay, so render is still, let's just keep that looking at light 2. That's fine. I did a similar thing here with the null. So with my camera, we have look at null 3. So even if, let's say if I like move my camera up or over, right, it is always going to look at wherever that is. Right, so you can kind of use this as a if you want to move your camera around, it's a little bit easier tool to do that. But I think I like boom, boom. That's good. And then let's do the shadow again for our light 2 since we're doing that. Shadows. Boom, looks good. Okay. And finally, let's look at fog. So fog is, I'm going to add one more little sphere here because we can see this little guy has been hiding because my render only says Geo1, Geo2. I could have also done that like so. There's only 2 of them, so it doesn't really make sense. Like sometimes I have 10 different geos, and I only want the first 9 to be rendered. I don't want Geo 10 to be rendered. So you type in something like Geo 1 through 9, and it'll render all those, but not the ones outside of that. Or if you want to do everything, just whatever, little star there, that works. Okay, so this little guy, it looks like he's completely in the shadows. So are you in the shadows? So my fog is still off. Okay, great. Let's bring him up a little bit. This one is, there we go. Okay. Oh, you know why? It's because my light, I made it with such a small cone angle. What did I have light 1 at? A little bit more. Let me see how I had that before. Light 1. Okay, there we go. Slight difference. I'm just getting a little bit of light coming from that. Let's actually... Okay, I like that. So there's a little bit of light coming from that. Cool. Fog, what's fog going to do is, depending on... Actually, I'm getting a little error here now with my cursor. Okay, so let's look at cam, hit P. In the settings tab here, fog by default is off, but let's do something like that. You can play around with these different ones. Basically like linear, exponential, squared exponential. It just changes the rate at which the density of the fog changes, whether you're close or far away from the camera. So what this near and far value, what that means is these are units of distance from the camera. So to get a sense of this, let's look. So here's what our actual spheres look like. Our camera, so this is at 0, 0, 0. What's our camera value actually? Let's go back. So cam is at Z5. So I'm 5 units away from this big sphere, basically. Or I'm 5 units away, at least from its center. And it's actually quite big. So really I'm probably like 4 units away from the front surface of the biggest sphere. And so we can see here on fog. So at 0 units, there's going to be no fog. At 10 units, it's going to be complete fog. And so at this front surface is like 4 units away. So it's kind of like getting like 40% of the fog power. So we did something like, you kind of just tweak this to whatever values like make sense for you. This actually really works well when you have a lot of depth to your objects, like a lot of Z depth. So things in the back will be like very obscured, very foggy. Things in front will be still very bright and sharp. And so based on that, you just kind of play around with that. And let me bring this guy more to the back then. So that is completely, it's not being hit by the light at all. Let me do point light to see if that, doing this one now actually, point light. So you can really, there we go, okay. So I'm just making sure because there's a kind of, is it dark due to the lighting? Is it dark due to the fog? So you kind of like do tests, like these things can run hand in hand. So I'm just doing the point light right now just to test that the point light is hitting this properly. But turn the fog back on. And let's see again. So I've got, so the Z here is -10. The camera's at 5. So I'm, about 15, 16 units away from that yellow sphere. Fog far is like that. If I did that, let's see. Yeah, see, now you can see it's kind of coming back. Okay, so this could be cool if you have this actually animated. Maybe it's like moving around. As it gets closer, it gets brighter. As it goes back in the distance, it gets darker and darker. So that could be a cool thing to do. Also, you can keep in mind, we could talk later about doing things like skyboxes. So actually using a kind of big sphere maybe, or big box that your entire environment is placed in, to create a kind of virtual environment type of thing. That could be cool. But for now, let's just keep it as a top. And let's do 1280. And I'm going to add this with an over. Okay. And I don't know, maybe I'm just going to play around here because my rim light is this kind of like purplish thing here. So let's go, I don't know, let's do like a kind of purplish thing. And let's actually, let's do period. I want it to be mostly dark. And actually what I'm going to do, you know what? I changed my mind. I'm going to make this 1280 by 1280. So you can see what I'm going to do here. And then I'm going to transform it because I want to rotate. So the purple is coming just from this corner. So like about like that maybe. And maybe scale it up a little bit. Oops. And then of course I have this little problem. Come back. And then here I'll do a fit top to bring it back to just 1280. There we go. So, it's a little something, right? So there's a little light back there, and then it kind of makes the rim lighting seem more realistic. Then you play with the fog, to kind of get that to where it looks, where it should be. Maybe then I would even do like a level, perhaps, like if I need, maybe like a little less contrast, graze it out a little bit. I don't know. All right, that's looking pretty good. And then maybe one other final thing that's a little unrelated. You might notice on the edge of the sphere, by default, I can kind of tell these like points. It doesn't look very smooth at all. And that's because, by default, just the number of points that we see here. So you can kind of see like the structure of that. One way to tweak that would be if we go in here to detail, and I'm just gonna be a little crazy here, and now that looks better to my eye. So it's always a negotiation. If this is changing every frame, if you got some other noise SOP or something happening to it, maybe that becomes too many points and you start to see a frame rate drop, because now that has quite a lot of points, right? But in this case, it's not actually changing every frame, so I can get away with that. All right, spacey.